This is Delhi. Please stand by for the next broadcast. This is All India Radio. In our national program of features today, we bring to you an audio biography of Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose. The program is titled Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose, Memoir of the Extraordinaire. The feature will showcase the life history of Padma Shri Dr. Lukose, who was a pioneer, an institution builder, and a woman who carved a niche by sheer merit and dedication despite all hurdles.
The principle that governed her life was helping others and being of service.
She was a woman of strong will.
She had a lot of struggle.
She was a very remarkable personality.
She was very unconventional.
She was a very good Surgeon General and she was quite fierce.
This is a saga of the legendary daughter of Travancore, Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose, who broke many a glass ceiling. Demure in appearance, but armed with steely grit and determination in her visage, she changed the face of healthcare in Kerala. She has to her credit a long list of firsts in many fields. Dr. Mary Lukose was the first female graduate in the University College, the first Indian woman to get a medical degree from London, the first woman Surgeon General, and the first woman legislator of the state of Travancore. She was conferred with the prestigious Padma Shri, besides many other awards and accolades. Born on the 2nd of August 1886 in Ayamanam, Kottayam, in erstwhile Travancore, in an angelic Syrian Christian family, Mary Poonen was the only child to her parents. Her father, Dr. T.E. Poonen, was the first medical graduate in Travancore and the royal physician of the Travancore state. Leena Chandran, journalist and editor, tells us more about Mary's father.
She was born in a family that had produced many eminent figures in the fields of medicine, engineering, and administration. Most of them were pioneers in their own area of specialization. Her father, Dr. T. Poonen himself, was a skilled doctor who had led the efforts to teach midwifery in the state. He was also the first one from Travancore to travel to England to pursue medicine studies.
Needless to say, her father was a role model, and she derived inspiration from him. Mary Poonen was given the best of education available at that time. In spite of affluence and privileges, she was raised with great discipline by a British governess. Unfortunately, her mother's poor health and her father's busy schedule had cut them off from other relatives. Yet, a relatively lonely childhood did not affect her as a person, and she grew up balanced, kind, and tenacious. Young Mary's spark and sharp mind were visible from a very young age. However, Mary had a tough time getting admitted into college. Dr. K. Rajashekharan Nair, renowned neurologist and writer, tells us about the difficulties Mary had to face to study her subject of interest.
She joined the University College taking a science course. Unfortunately, that was refused, but she was given a concession. They said, you can join history and economics and continue your BA education. She was the only woman student in University College during her time. She passed a BA exam and then she wanted to take up her father's profession, even though Calcutta Madras medical colleges was already started, but she couldn't gain admission over there. There was a lot of difficulty. So the only way by which she could circumvent this was to go over to London.
At a time when women were stereotypically delegated to home and children, Mary was fortunate to have followed her dream. Leena Chandran further shares,
Those were the times when girls were married off at age 13 or 14 and had to spend the rest of their time as homemakers. Mary wanted to make a difference. It was her father's wish to send her to England for studying medicine, and she also got financial help from the Maharaja for this purpose. Mary's passion for medicine was something very natural. She was also inspired by the European nursing sisters who used to assist her father. The art of healing became her life work. It was also a service to humanity.
The then Maharaja, Sri Moolam Tirunal Ramavarma, took the responsibility of educating Mary in London. She became the first Indian female student to receive her MBBS degree from London University. Inquisitive by nature, she did not confine herself to medical studies only. Rather, she derived time to pursue her other interests as well, which included music and sports. Dr. Mary Ganguly, granddaughter of Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose, recalls her grandmother sharing her experience while in London.
I remember her saying long, cold, miserable winters with hardly seeing the sun. And then one day there was a bit of sun. And she went to the post office, and the lady in the post office said, "Isn't it a beautiful day?" And she's wondering, what are they talking about? They finally saw. But another time, because her friends knew that she was homesick, they came and they gave her something and said, "We found this for you. We got it for you." And she said, "What is it?" And they said, "It's a mango." And it was not recognizable as a mango, but they had gone to so much trouble to find something and pay the money and bring it. And she was very touched by that.
And then there was war. The raging First World War in 1914 pushed her to continue her stay in the UK and help cope up with the endless medical workload created due to the war. Not losing focus, she continued to pursue her quest for knowledge along with work and went on to get a master's at the Rotunda Hospital, Dublin, in obstetrics and gynecology, and thereafter in pediatrics from the renowned Great Ormond Street Hospital, London.
By the time she finished her MBBS, the World War I came, interrupting all movements for the ordinary people from UK back to India. She was not at all put down by it.
In March 1916, the news of her father's demise left her heartbroken. Despite a comfortable life back in London, with many job opportunities, she still chose to return to her homeland.
She was offered prestigious job opportunities in British hospitals, especially because it is wartime. The British people needed skilled doctors. However, Dr. Mary always considered it her duty to serve her native land, which had no advanced facilities in healthcare. Also, she had to repay the debt of love and care bestowed upon her by the Maharaja of Travancore.
Sounds of gunshots, panic-stricken cries, and the devastation of war reverberated all around. Young Mary walked across the gangway to her ship with uncertainty hovering on her face. She pondered over the challenges waiting for her back home in India. Dr. Mary returned to India at a time when the country was under British rule. It was a time when all the good positions were reserved for Britishers only, and Indians were given subordinate jobs. As a result, her job application to a leading hospital in Travancore for the vacancy of an obstetrician met with substantial resistance, in spite of the Maharaja's intervention and her required qualifications.
The then Maharaja, Srimudan Tirunal, who considered her almost as his daughter, made her a doctor in a hospital which is called Taichad Hospital. It was in Taichad Hospital she became the doctor. She wanted to be the chief of the doctor, and fortunately, that position was then occupied by a British lady who did not have any gynecology qualification per se. Even then, she was not given the position for a few years till that lady, Dr. Onskin, she returned to UK. The position fell vacant and she could get it.
In 1917, Dr. Mary married K.K. Lukose, an advocate who went on to become a judge in the High Court of Travancore. K.K. Lukose was highly educated and progressive in his thoughts. He was an understanding husband who supported her wholeheartedly. Mary was blessed with 2 children. Her daughter Gracie followed her mother's footsteps and became a surgeon. Her son, K.P. Lukose, was appointed as the Consul General and permanent representative of India to the United Nations in Geneva. Dr. Ganguly reminisces.
There used to be a portrait in her house, a painting of both of them. So he was wearing the pagdi with the gold, the kashawai and the turban and all that, and she's wearing a sari and she's wearing various medals and things like this. But, they look like a very distinguished couple, and I think they were supportive of each other.
It would not be wrong to say that behind the success of a woman, there was another woman. After the demise of the Maharaja, Maharani Sethu Lakshmibai became the regent of Travancore. She appointed Dr. Mary as the Darban physician and soon the chief of medical services in Travancore. Kavita Rao, journalist and author, shares with us Dr. Mary's association with the Queen and how they worked in tandem for women's welfare in Travancore.
Dr. Mary, by great good fortune, in 1916, she met Sethu Lakshmibai, who became the senior Maharani of Travancore. And the two of them worked in tandem to actually shape Travancore and change its culture. The Maharani Sethu Lakshmibai believed in the education of women. They worked together as partners to increase the participation of women in public society, to make women more educated. And the historian Robin Jeffrey has pointed out that when Dr. Poonen Lukose became a Darbar physician in 1924, 15% of Travancore women were literate. That was still more than 7 times the all India proportion. When she retired in 1942, close to half of all girls between the ages of 5 and 15 were at school. Female literacy had reached 36%. It's hard to say that this is all due to Dr. Mary. However, there's no doubt that her success must have inspired many women in Kerala. And along with the Maharani's efforts, the two of them working together were a powerful force in showing women that, yes, women can be educated, women can be legislators, women can be surgeon generals, women can talk about public health. They don't just have to deliver babies. They can be involved in important issues of public health as well.
But Dr. Mary's new role and responsibilities were the beginning of many roadblocks ahead. A primary challenge was to change the age-old mindset of people towards allopathic medicine and modern methods of treatment.
There were very few people in Travancore who actually went to doctors. There was a deep suspicion of modern medicine. People usually went to native healers. And then if they didn't get a resolution from native healers, they would go to Ayurvedic doctors. And they would go to allopathic doctors only when they were at a completely advanced stage. So Mary says in her memoir, she says the maternity cases brought to hospital were almost always advanced septic cases. In most cases, nothing could be done by the doctors in hospital to save either the mother or the child or both. The feeling had somehow gained ground that hospitals were like poor homes meant for the poor, uncared and abandoned. So people went to hospital only when they were sure of dying. So it was a big challenge for her and many other doctors at the time to actually persuade people and especially women to come to see her and be healed.
How to overcome these societal tribulations and get people to the hospital was her constant contemplation. Dr. Mary witnessed immense suffering and loss of life on account of lack of proper treatment. In those days, maternal mortality and neonatal mortality rates were high, as local midwives conducted deliveries in an unskilled and primitive manner, and that too under unhygienic conditions.
The only women who resorted to hospital treatment in times of illness and for confinement and delivery were usually those in the lower strata of society, like fisherfolk and Harijans. Even in their case, the sick and the women in labor were invariably carried to hospitals at the last stage in a hopeless condition after they were treated by quacks, and in the case of expectant mothers, by unqualified and untrained women called dais.
She realized that she would have to do more to get people to use healthcare facilities fully and get rid of their prejudices. Uma Maheshwari, researcher and historian, shares with us.
In those days, women seldom approached hospitals for a safe delivery. And Mary had a tough time because she wanted to change that attitude. So Mary evolved a system of giving training to midwives in childbirth and neonatal care. And she had her deliveries in the hospital for others to emulate her. Then she visited every household and appealed to the family members to utilize the service of the hospitals.
Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose was a determined lady. She evolved a way to get the local midwives on her side by starting a pupil midwife training program, where the midwives' children were given proper training in the hospital. This became a huge success as it got the support of young generation students advocating for her. Apparently, the older midwives did not feel threatened with her practice, as their own children were supporting Dr. Mary in her endeavor. Apart from her revolutionary steps, Dr. Mary was fortunate to get the support of the royal family in creating awareness about modern medicine and spreading a positive message. Well, how did that happen? Kavita Rao has this to say.
After she became the royal physician to the Rani, Sethu Lakshmibai, when she became the Maharani of Travancore, then Dr. Mary was a royal physician to her and she delivered both her children. So perhaps then she got a little more respect and legitimacy in the eyes of the public.
Uma Maheshwari further adds,
Maharani Sethu Lakshmibai was the regent then, and she appointed Dr. Mary Poonen as the head of the medical department. And maybe a decade later, Maharaja Sri Chitra Tirunal conferred her with the title of Vaidya Shastra Kushala. And another important personality we had in Travancore is Amma Maharani Sethu Parvatibai, mother of Sri Chitra Tirunal. She sought her services and the message spread wide and it percolated to the lowest levels. And there was a flow of inpatients to maternity hospitals. And records show there were 100 patients in a particular year. And after this, Amma Maharani seeking her service, it rose to nearly 400 or 500. So that was the influence.
Life has never been easy for anyone. Even after much appreciation for her selfless service, the challenges in Dr. Mary's professional life did not end.
There were many challenges Mary had to face in her professional career. She was dragged into a court case because of a cesarean operation. The relatives of a pregnant woman who approached the court for compensation from Dr. Mary after she performed a cesarean surgery to take the dead baby out of the uterus. When it was clear that the baby could not be saved, the doctor wanted to save its mother's life, a decision that should have been appreciated for its timely execution. Instead, the patient's kin went to court. Mary immediately sought the help of Dr. T.H. Somervell, the famous doctor of the London Mission Society. He argued for Dr. Mary and she won the case.
Despite all hurdles, there was no looking back for Dr. Mary. She was so proficient in her work that she used to perform caesarean surgeries in the hospital under the light of hurricane lamps. Sounds inconceivable, doesn't it? Professor Nair tells us how Dr. Mary could carry surgeries in such circumstances.
The Pekyan hospital did not have an electricity connection at that time. She used to do the cesarean surgeries under hurricane lamps, and multiple lamps had to be kept at different places for the operating site to be seen. It is with this difficulty she started the work, and gradually she gained the confidence of the local people so much they all started calling her as Dr. Amma, that means Dr. Mother. And the people understood that the complications of delivery could be drastically reduced if proper treatment, if proper care is given to the pregnant women.
In 1924, Dr. Poonen was appointed as the acting Surgeon General, the first ever woman Surgeon General in India as well as the world. This was no small feat, and of course was met with resistance from the patriarchs. Finally, in 1938, she was declared as the Surgeon General in lieu of all her perseverance. With her outstanding administrative capabilities, Dr. Mary built a stable monitoring system which drafted a roadmap for healthcare in Kerala. For this, she travelled extensively all over Travancore, inspecting various hospitals, addressing school children and the public in general to spread healthcare awareness. It was her commitment and relentless work which was instrumental in the establishment of the Nagarkoil TB Sanatorium, an X-ray and Radium Institute at Thiruvananthapuram.
She established the Radium Institute in Trivandrum and the TB Center in Nagarkoil, which was once the part of Travancore. And she established the mobile X-ray units. We don't have mobile X-ray units today because in those days, the ambulance, they will bring the mobile X-ray units to the households and they take X-rays. And such equipment is not available today. I think mobile X-ray units are there in the hospitals, but they will be taken inside the hospitals only, not outside. But in those days, I have seen records where mobile X-ray units are taken to the patient's house for taking X-rays. They are very small equipments. And the only condition they insisted was the availability of electricity in the houses where it is being taken.
Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose was indeed a pathbreaker in the truest sense. In 1922, she was elected the first lady legislator in Travancore and continued to be nominated till 1937 to the Legislative Assembly. It was certainly not easy tackling this patriarchal domain. She faced explicit questioning and had to regularly defend her policy decisions. But with her tenacity and remarkable organizational skills, she spearheaded various public health initiatives.
Mary was very pro-vaccination at a time when people didn't really believe in vaccination. And we know this from the minutes of the Travancore Legislative Assembly proceedings. Dr. Mary was actually the first woman legislator in India, and she fought for compulsory vaccination. At the time that she was a legislator, there was a smallpox epidemic, and there was a motion by a legislator. He wanted to move a resolution calling for vaccination to be made optional, because he and his other supporters believed that vaccinations were more dangerous than smallpox, and they wanted it to be completely optional. And Dr. Mary absolutely stood up for compulsory vaccination, and the things that she says were so revolutionary for the time. She explains that smallpox is a disease spread by air, and she explains that isolation of the patient is impossible in a crowded city like Travancore. So she says petty inconveniences and even risks have to be encountered by individuals for the sake of the greater good of the community. And she said very clearly, if you do not mind getting infected with smallpox, the matter does not end there. You're infecting other people who are not vaccinated.
Dr. Mary had an illustrious career against many a hurdle in her professional life, but nothing could match the intensity of pain she faced in her personal life. She witnessed the death of her parents while she was unmarried. She lost her husband early in 1947. Her daughter died in 1954 at a young age in a tragic accident. Her son, a brilliant diplomat, unfortunately died of a sudden heart attack in 1975. Yet, she did not engulf herself in self-pity and continued her work and social activities relentlessly. Dr. Mary was much more than the tragedies of her life. It would not be wrong to say that people like her are paradoxes.
The other thing that she overcame was tremendous personal tragedy. So she had to bury her father and her husband and both her children. I think that is a lot of personal grief for someone to overcome. She had a way of always looking forward to the next thing. But after her son died, she kind of stopped looking forward to things. I'm a doctor and I work in geriatrics, so I take care of older people, many of whom have experienced great tragedies in their life. And you see these same differences. There are people who just crumple after one loss and cannot go on. And there are others who one thing after another happens to them and they just keep going. And I wonder how they do it, but they don't see it as a choice.
Today, when we still struggle with issues pertaining to gender parity and women's equality, a century ago, when the socio-political landscape was against women's emancipation, Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose did not let any hurdle come in the way of her ambitions. She was a visionary who challenged stereotypes to leave behind a tale of immense inspiration and grit to follow. Her effective leadership, innovative thinking, and service to the community are an inspiration even today, which must be acknowledged with applause.
In the national program of features, you just heard a feature titled Dr. Mary Poonen Lukose, Memoir of the Extraordinaire. The feature was scripted by Raman, Khilnani and Meenakshi, Mund. Narration was rendered by Manoj, Mainkar. The program was produced by Meenakshi, Mund. A presentation of the Central English Features Unit. This broadcast came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.